What if the most important marker of how well you age wasn't your cholesterol or blood pressure, but the length of your telomeres? Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies behind living a longer, healthier, and more purposeful life. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, an exercise physiologist with a passion for making science simple and life better as we age. My guest is Dr. Bill Andrews, molecular and population geneticist with over 50 patents in the field of anti-aging science. He is best known for his groundbreaking discovery of human telomerase, an enzyme that plays a key role in how cells age. Dr. Andrews is also the creator of Telo-Vital, a supplement designed to support telomere health, and he has dedicated his career to translating cutting-edge research into real-world strategies to help us live longer and better. Today, we'll explore how telomere science is reshaping what we know about aging, what it means for your everyday health, and how we might someday both extend lifespan and healthspan in ways once thought impossible. This conversation will help you reconnect with your body's cellular intelligence and reveal a new path forward, a path to aging well. The Aging Well podcast encourages informed decision-making and always consult your physician and scientific literature when making decisions about your health. Well, Dr. Andrews, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. You're widely known for your work on telomeres and the discovery of telomerase. Can you explain in simple terms for our viewers and listeners, what are telomeres and why do they matter for how we age?
Okay. Let me first just qualify. I don't just work on telomeres and telomerase. I've just, in all my research, decided that is the one problem that we need to solve if we're ever going to cure aging. No matter what else we do to try to cure aging, it's never going to be cured unless we also solve the telomere shortening problem. Okay, so telomeres are things found at the tips of our chromosomes. As an analogy, I like to compare them to ride tickets at an amusement park. Okay, when a cell divides, it loses a ticket, just as if you were going on a ride at an amusement park. You lose a ticket. You don't actually keep track of your tickets. Cells don't have brains, so they don't know how many tickets they have. But when you run out of tickets, you can't go on any more rides, and your cells can't divide anymore. And that was actually discovered in the 1960s, early 1960s, by Leonard Hayflick, when he found that human cells can only divide a certain number of times in a petri dish. He found that cells from a newborn baby could divide about 50 times and then would completely stop dividing. Cells from a 50-year-old would divide about 25 times and completely stop. And then cells from a 90-year-old would divide about 10 times and completely stop. He called that the Hayflick limit, and it was the first time that anybody said somehow cells know how many times they have divided, how many more times they can divide. And everybody thought he was nuts at first, but I thought, wow, this could explain everything about aging. And so I got really on board a long time ago, but maybe in the 1970s, about 10 years after he made this discovery. But I started thinking the only way I could think of that a cell would know how many times it's divided and how many times it has left to divide was it had to have something like ride tickets at an amusement park. It would rip off, and because the cells don't have brains, as I said. So then in the early 1990s, I heard about from a guy named Cal Harley speak about the fact that telomeres shorten every time a cell divides, and that he could actually measure the length of telomeres that are found at the tips of your chromosomes. He could measure the length of them, and he could tell you how old you were. And more importantly, he could tell you how long it would be before you die of old age. And so I was stunned by this presentation, and I met him even before he got off the stage and said, hey, has anybody figured out how to re-lengthen it? And he said, no, people have been looking for it. We theorized that there's an enzyme that we've given the name telomerase to, and nobody can seem to discover this. And I just said, let me come and work with you, and I'll have it figured out. I'll have it discovered in 3 months. And it was like shortest job interview ever. I'd already had a really big, illustrious career in biotech breakthroughs. So he knew who I was. I'd been involved in the discovery of a lot of different things that I'm sure you've heard of before, but we won't go into those now. But he offered me the job, and 3 months and 17 days later, I had discovered human telomerase. People that had been working with him beforehand and had discovered a similar enzyme that they called telomere terminal transferase. They found it in a pond scum organism called Tetrahymena. They ended up getting the Nobel Prize. for the discovery, because that's how the Nobel Prize works. It goes to the originator of a field, and they had discovered this enzyme in tetrahymena 10 years earlier. But it actually was recognized immediately. I was actually one of the ones that endorsed that they get the Nobel Prize, because I wanted to see that this whole field of telomere biology got a Nobel Prize. So we discovered this enzyme called telomerase, and the way we did it is knowing, even though I said every time a cell divides, the telomeres get a little bit shorter, that couldn't be true in our reproductive cells, because if it did get shorter in our reproductive cells, our children would be born with shorter telomeres than we have. Their children would be born with shorter telomeres than they have. And we would have been extinct as a species a million years ago because we wouldn't have any DNA left. And so we knew that in our reproductive cells, somehow telomere shortening was prevented. So we ended up studying those cells and also some cancer cells that produce telomeres. And we ended up discovering this enzyme called telomerase. And I pronounce it different than you do, but every pronunciation is correct. So, we then put telomerase into normal human fibroblast cells in a petri dish and showed that enzyme prevented telomeres from shortening in those cells too, and it actually prevented the Hayflick limit from ever being reached. And when we looked at every biomarker of aging that you can look at in cells in a petri dish, we saw that aging not just stopped, but it got reversed in every way imaginable. Okay, and that was not expected. we thought we'd stop aging, but we didn't expect to see reversed. And we've learned a lot since then why it actually does reverse aging when you use various techniques called gene therapy or gene delivery to get the gene into the cells, which is not something that really is set up for actually human use right now. But it was a great tool for 30 years where we were able to study the importance of telomere biology and be able to show lengthening telomeres slows down, stops, and reverses aging depending on how much telomerase gets produced. So I started Sierra Sciences with the goal of finding some type of pill that you could take that would contain a nutraceutical or chemical or what. At that time, I didn't really care what it was. I just wanted to find anything. Even if it wasn't something people could take, at least I'd learn something about the mechanism of action. But I wanted to find something that would actually turn on the gene that we already have in our cells. The fact that our reproductive cells produce telomerase to lengthen said that all of our cells of the body have that gene. It's just shut off. And I can spend an hour explaining why there was an evolutionary advantage to our species to shut that gene off. But it had nothing to do with health of the individuals. It had to do with health of the species. So that's what we've been doing. And we have a assay. We developed a high-throughput robotic assay that measures telomerase expression in human cells in a petri dish. And we have been testing different chemicals, nutraceuticals. In the case of chemicals, when we find something that actually does induce cells to start producing telomerase, we can modify it to make it even better. So a process called medicinal chemistry through our medicinal chemists here that work here. So we've been moving forward, and it's been working on it for years, but we're making progress, and we can extrapolate to the point that we see it coming in the future where we're going to have something potent enough to actually reverse aging in a way that doesn't use the procedures of gene therapy or gene delivery. But along the way, so I'm not a marketer, I'm just a scientist, but along the way, we have discovered things that do turn on the expression of telomerase a little bit. And that's actually not a bad thing because it does slow down the aging process, okay? It's like other things might also slow down the aging process. I'm not really into the habit of studying everything that's on the market, but at least the stuff that we have does slow down the rate of telomere shortening, therefore slows down aging. And so companies have been interested in marketing these things. So I say, okay, I'll license it to you, but I don't want to have anything to do with marketing. I'm not a marketer at all. But I don't know. That was a long answer to a question that I can't even remember what the question was, but I hope I answered it.
No, you did. And we'll keep kind of diving into that a little bit deeper. So kind of where are we in the current state of telomerase activation research, and how close do you think we are to applying this therapeutically on a more broad scale to where it's going to be available to the average Joe that wants to improve their longevity?
Well, it already is available. Okay, right now our most potent telomerase inducers that are nutraceuticals. We have some chemicals too, but they're going to require like 10 to 15 years of FDA approval. We have some nutraceuticals now produce more than anything else in the world. Induces more telomerase expression than anything else in the world. That has been we licensed those to a company called Touchstone Essentials, and they now market that as a product called Telo-Vital, Telo-Vital. They just launched it just about a month and a half ago.
If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend, because aging is something we're all doing, and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below, and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you, and now back to the podcast. And so how do telomeres, I got to think about how to pronounce it now that we've had that conversation about the pronunciation, but how do telomeres interact with some of the other kind of hallmarks of aging? We think of like inflammation, mitochondrial decline, DNA damage, and those types of things.
Well, all those things are important. I never said that telomeres were the only things that people needed to worry about. I just said that we'll never actually live longer and healthier, live healthy and longer than 125 years, unless we solve the telomere shortening problem. Because the math makes it really clear that a human cannot possibly live longer than 125 years without solving that. But that doesn't mean we don't have to do the other things too. I just say all the time, no matter what else we do to cure aging will actually never be cured until we also solve the telomere shortening problem. So I'm focused most of my time on that, but I'm still focused on the other things like mitochondria dysfunction and NAD levels and all that kind of. And believe me, I take all my supplements to make certain that I'm covering all those bases as well as I can. But but here's the thing that separates telomeres from all the other theories, and that's that telomeres are the only ones that we actually know the mechanism of action to. Okay, so for instance, like DNA methylation, that's definitely been correlated with aging. It's called an epigenetic clock, but it's actually not epigenetics. It's actually an epigenetic mechanism, but they call it the epigenetic clock. Real epigenetic clocks would be sequencing total RNA, which we do here at Sierra Sciences. So the methylation, the DNA gets methylated. That correlates with aging. But how does the DNA get methylated? It gets methylated by an enzyme called DNA methylase. How does the cell know where to methylate? What controls all that? Okay, and the only theory that makes any sense is that telomeres control that. Okay, so this might get a little more scientific than your audience might. I don't know much about your audience, I have to confess. But,
I like the science, so let's dive into it.
Okay, so there's such things in our chromosomes called enhancers. Okay, so my Ph.D. is in molecular and population genetics. Molecular genetics is all about studying how genes are turned off and on. Population genetics is all the why and how. Why did we evolve these things? Okay, so in terms of gene regulation, which is all what epigenetics is all about, there's things called enhancer sequences throughout our chromosomes. And these are sequences that can be found, like DNA is a long string of beads. Typical chromosomes, about 100 million beads in length. The beads are called bases. But sometimes like 100,000 bases away from the gene will be this enhancer sequence. And if like this is my DNA here, and the space between is a gap of 100,000 bases. An enhancer can fold over, come in contact with the promoter of a gene, and turn it on or off, depending on the relative situation. And so this is a well-known mechanism. It's really well understood. I learned all about it 40 plus years ago in basic cell biology 101 classes. Telomeres have all the hallmarks of an enhancer sequence. They have sequences that are common for like enhancers. They have proteins that bind to it that are the same proteins that bind to enhancers. So the telomere can fold over and turn a gene on or off. Okay. In the case of telomeres, which is different from enhancers, the telomere gets shorter and shorter. And so it's less able to reach all the genes that it could when you were young. and that causes changes in gene expression. Okay, and one of those genes that gets regulated are the DNA methylases. Okay, and also the sirtuins and all these things. So telomere length, we can lengthen and shorten telomeres, and find that it exactly correlates with all the other biomarkers of aging. So telomeres, like Dr. Rhonda Pinnell, he used to be the head of MD Anderson. He was interviewed by Diane Sawyer years ago. He called telomeres the kingpin of aging, okay, because they appear to control just about everything else. And with his studies, he showed that it controlled mitochondria dysfunction. So, of course, mitochondria are extremely important for energy levels, that are powerhouses of our cells. They don't survive very well, and they get destroyed. But it's important to be able to replace any damaged mitochondria. And the thing that controls your ability for mitochondria biogenesis to make new mitochondria is telomeres. Okay, so Dr. Rhonda Pinnell showed that the length of the telomere controlled the expression of PGC1 alpha, which is there's several versions of it. They're mitochondria proteins. 95% of all the proteins that make up a mitochondria are encoded by the nuclear, not the mitochondria DNA. The mitochondria DNA is a small circular thing that only has, I think, 13 different genes on it. So the health of a mitochondria is controlled by the nuclear DNA, our regular chromosomes, and those are controlled by our telomeres. Okay, so it comes down to. And so it's like we aren't finding anything. We have the ability to, because of gene induction, we can turn telomerase on and off, therefore lengthen and shorten telomeres. And we haven't found anything that's not correlated with the length of the telomere. So we definitely believe we have to lengthen the telomeres if we're ever going to control aging. And we don't know if we have to do anything else until after we complete that project. So
you better get on it.
Yeah, well, I'm working. It's literally costing us $2 million a month to do the screening and testing of looking for anything that induces telomerase. And we keep finding stronger and stronger hits. We call them hits. Every time we find something, whether it's a nutraceutical or chemical, we call it a hit. We keep finding stronger. And we can extrapolate and say if we could continue at the present burn rate, we could have something ready for testing in humans 3 years, 1 to 3 years actually. But right now, there's nothing more potent than this product I mentioned before, Telo-Vital. And at the moment, because I don't like marketing, but I like working with reputable companies that have high ethics and stuff like that. So I believe that anything in the future that I discover or that my team discovers is going to be licensed directly to Touchstone Essentials. And so when we come up with more potent stuff, that'll be where to find them.
Always good to hear about the reputable companies and those that are really based on the science and not just on the snake oil stuff that we're being fed when it comes to longevity and health span.
I don't know them all, but I can tell you, and I won't do it here, but I can tell you I've worked with a few that I just absolutely walked away from because I would say, hey, it's not going to work. And they would say, well, think of the money we'll make. And I just say, I'm not in it for the money. I want people to be happier and healthier, even if I'm not the one that does it. So I want to support other people that are working on good things and stuff like that. Because number one goal is to cure my own aging. I don't have to be the one that does it. I'll be happy if somebody else cures mine.
And you're an ultramarathoner, I understand. Is that true?
Yes. My wife is too. We met at a race, so that's why we're both ultramarathon runners. But we run 50, 100-mile races for fun. It's like, I often say when I'm at 95 miles into a race, God, I hope it never ends. Because they're always filled with adventure and stuff like that. But it's also very healthy. I think that, so one of the things I talk about, I'm sorry, every time you mention something, I go on a tangent. But
that's okay.
A lot of people think that doing too much exercise is bad for you. It's because I've done a lot of work. I've been at races. I've taken blood from runners before, during, and after races, studied them, things like that. I'm 100% convinced that it's not the amount of endurance exercise you do. It's how hard you push it, okay, that's bad for you. And so if you keep it fun, I always say if the running or the endurance exercise, even if it's kayaking, whatever, it doesn't have to be running. But if you're doing an endurance sport and it stops being fun, quit, okay? Save it for another day. Because if you push it, that's going to cause inflammation and inflammation is the number one cause of aging. Okay, and so you're going to find, if you do take that philosophy, you're going to find out that after a while you can run 100 miles and have fun the whole time, and you can measure your inflammatory markers like CRP and C-reactive protein and others, and find that you're not inducing inflammation. The thing that induces inflammation is like the occasional runner or kayaker or whatever. Maybe goes out and exercises once every 2 weeks, and then enters a marathon and does well, crosses the finish line on their hands and knees throwing up, and then are stiff as a board for a week or 2 weeks, can't do anything except recover, and their inflammatory markers are skyrocketing through the roof. That's not good for you, okay? But being a consistent exerciser, keeping it fun, exercising is extremely good for longevity and keeping inflammation low and keeping you healthy, okay? So I run every single day. I'm right now approaching my 2,000th consecutive day of running 2 miles or more, and that's only because I missed a day on April 9th, 2000. So I had to start over.
You got that marked on your calendar, huh?
Well, no, it's a day I'll never forget because I woke up at like just after midnight and said, "Oh my God, I forgot to run today," and that was very depressing after I'd already run hundreds and hundreds of days at the time. Whatever. Yeah,
this is a little bit of a tangent, but it amazes me. Like, I teach exercise science, and I'm finding there's so many things that I have to unteach about exercise. And, one is this whole concept of overtraining. We talk so much about, I got to be careful of overtraining. It's like, there's no such thing as overtraining. There's just stupid trainers, people doing it wrong. And I use as a prime example the Iron Cowboy, and I always forget his first name, but his last name's Lawrence. And I don't know why I can never remember it, other than the fact that my son played lacrosse and went to school with and played football with a kid that was a Lawrence. And
I played,
so I always want to say Jerry.
Lacrosse in high school. Go ahead.
Did you? Yeah, we didn't have it when I was in high school, at least where I was at. But so he ran 50 Ironman distances in 50 days in 50 states.
Oh,
and he actually reports
Dean Karnazes. You're talking about Dean Karnazes. Is that right?
No, this was Lawrence, and I should remember his name. I mean, kick myself every time I go and talk about him. I forget his first name, and then I'll get off this podcast, and then it'll pop in my head. But he ran 50 Ironman distances in 50 days in 50 states, and he reported that in the last third of those distances, he was actually increasing his performance, which just goes against everything we talk about in terms of overtraining. You're doing 26.2 miles, 105 miles, I think, of biking, 2 miles swimming every day, and you're limited in your recoverability. That should be tearing up your body, and here he's getting better.
No, I agree with that 100%. Whoever came up with this idea that you shouldn't run every day, you should run every other day, there's nothing in the scientific peer-reviewed literature that supports that. Okay, and I don't know where that came from. How could running every 48 hours be okay, but running every 24 hours not be okay? It all depends on how much you push it. Okay, and so good, we agree on that.
It's the same with resistance training too. I mean, there's so much evidence that the more frequent you lift weights, the better the benefits. And I actually went to a conference a number of years ago. This was when I was still in my Ph.D. program, and I was starting to question the whole training frequency concept. And so I decided I'm going to go to this one tutorial on weight training. And they listed off all the research I had been looking at that was supporting this idea of higher frequency training. And they said, but we still recommend every other day. It's like, you just gave me the science, and now you're going to contradict yourself by saying, well, we're not going to listen to the science. It just blows my mind.
It's hearsay. Play it safe. Go with the hearsay. Yeah. My business partner, Christian Chase, who lives in New Zealand, he just competed in the Mr. Universe contest in Las Vegas for I think the 50-plus-year-old group. And he didn't win, but the fact that he's qualified to even be in the competition is amazing. But he knows just about as much about aging and training and things like that he knows a lot more than I do. But he does believe in the idea keeping it fun and things like that. I never see him exhausted or tired or over pushing it. Yeah, but I always say there's no such thing as overtraining, just like there's no such thing as overthinking.
Right. So back to thinking. Let's get back to our telomerase. What is the difference between extending lifespan and health span, and how does the telomere science influence both of these?
Okay, well, for starters, in my opinion, there is no such thing as increasing lifespan without increasing health span. Okay, and I don't know a single person in my field that I collaborate with everybody. I don't know anybody in my field that thinks any differently like that, because people always say, "Oh, we're going to create old people living in computers, things like that, in beds operated by computers," and that's not the goal. I mean, what's the point of living a long time if you're not living? It's something I like to say a lot. But it's so. The health span, we got to look and behave and feel. We're 25, okay? We don't want to go younger than that because that's reversing development, not just aging. We just want to reverse aging. Development pretty much stops at about 25. There's still, of course, hair in your ears and things like that. Those are developmental things that occur later. But that's what we want to do is we want to get everybody feeling, looking, and behaving like they're 25 again. And I believe there's a chance telomere biology might solve everything, okay? Just because of what I was talking about before about its similarity to an enhancer sequence. I can also say that there's some data that suggests otherwise, and that is because it turns out very few animals on this planet age by telomere shorting. Those include humans, some non-human primates, dogs, cats, horses, and deer. I have to count them on my fingers to keep track of them all. But those are the only ones that have been shown to actually age by telomere shortening and have telomerase turned off in all their cells except their reproductive cells. Now, you notice I didn't say mice, and mice don't age by telomere shortening. There are studies that show that producing excess telomerase in mice does extend their lifespans, but it's because their telomere biology is very different. Somehow they have telomerase produced in all their cells, but their telomeres don't suddenly shorten until at the end. Then they drastically shorten. And so you can get mice to live longer by producing telomerase, but they already have telomerase. You're just producing more of it. I mentioned before Dr. Rhonda Pino, I think I did, had done some research and stuff like that, and he used engineered mice, where he actually, that's right, I was talking about mitochondria before with Dr. Rhonda Pino. He also did some studies to show that he could turn old mice into young mice in every way imaginable. But to do that, he had to first engineer mice to make them age like humans by telomere short. So he created a colony of mice that age just like humans. They have telomerase turned off, and their telomeres get shorter. And when he reintroduced telomerase into these mice, they got younger by every method of measurement there imaginable. Okay, and Diane Sawyer did an interview with him about that and the mitochondria.
Do you think we're kind of, to a degree, barking up the wrong tree with a lot of these so-called longevity studies that are being done on creatures, worms and mice and other species that are not as closely related to humans, especially with regards to telomere?
I don't know, and boy, I would be the last person in the world to tell them to stop doing them. I mean, it's like we're venturing into the unknown. I mean, I feel like I do know a lot about aging. In fact, I've given a lot of medical conferences, I've spoken at medical conferences, oftentimes a keynote speaker, and they're on videos. People can find these on YouTube, where I sometimes will spend a whole hour talking about why we age, okay, from an evolutionary perspective. Why was it evolutionary advantage to our species to have us develop an aging process? And why have we never evolved a way not to age? I explain that. I also explain how we age, okay, in a whole separate talk sometimes. And then there's talks where they're just the what, the why, the how, and the how not of age. Those are kind of things. But I have done a lot of work since I was 10 years old. My father was the one that put this obsession in my mind to cure aging. So I've been studying aging since I was 10 years old, but really got into it in high school and college when I was starting anti-aging clubs and things like that. But it's always been trying to understand why and how we age. And after everything I know, I still don't know enough to say that we are wasting our time studying C. elegans, the roundworm. It might be extremely useful. When we get telomere shortening problem solved, we might find out that the work they're doing in C. elegans and fruit flies and yeast and mice are invaluable. Okay, because and as I said, I want my own aging cured. I don't want to find out that, great, I lengthened my telomeres, but it only had a little bit of an effect on me. I want to make certain that everybody else is doing everything that they can to help find a cure for aging within my lifetime.
Why go to 125 if you can go to 150, right?
150 is a small number, I hope. It's like a lot of my presentations, I start off with, answering the question, why am I so obsessed with trying to cure aging? Because people say, am I afraid of dying? And I say, well, no, I'm actually afraid of missing out. Great things are going to happen in the future. And I watch scientific, like Star Trek, all the time. And First Contact was one of my favorite Star Trek movies. When we make first contact, I want to be there. And I just can't stand the thought of having it happen after I've passed away. So that's why I'm interested in the cure for aging.
Well, if you look in like the Bible, was it Methuselah that was over 800 years old?
900 some years old.
900, yeah.
There's a lot of good data now. I'm not going to say that he didn't really live to be, but there is a lot of good data suggesting the possibility that they were defining years by every full moon. Okay, and if you do Google searches, you can find some pretty good studies on that. I don't know. I have no explanation as to how somebody could have lived to be in the 900s, given what we know about telomere biology, which we evolved 300,000 years ago, so long before Methuselah and others. But there could be a religious perspective too. I don't know. Okay, I'm open to all possibilities, and who knows? But whatever. Right now, all I know is that I'm not going to live to be old unless I solve the telomere shortening problem.
So, what is the biological advantage to aging?
Well, there is no biological advantage. Okay, it's a species advantage. Okay, so because the environment is changing all the time. Okay, some species are going extinct, some species are thriving, just because they have the ability to adapt, or not, adapt is the wrong word. I shouldn't use adapt when I'm talking about evolution. But they have the ability to survive or not survive the new environments, because they didn't adapt, they just already had the ability to do it. Okay, so the way a species increases its chance of surviving a rapidly changing environment is to have as much diversity as possible within the species. Okay, so the more different types of species, individuals we have within the species, the more likely at least one or two of them, or 10 of them, or 100 of them are going to survive the new environment, and therefore our species takes on. But if we're all identical, the environment changes, we're either going to all die or we're all going to live. Okay, and that increases our chances that nobody in our species will survive, if that's the case. But so it turns out that we've been evolving ways of shuffling our genes or creating diversity, either by mutations or being infected by viruses that carry other genes into our body, or by, most recent was sexual reproduction, which was the first time we actually started shuffling our genes. Okay, so that increased diversity tremendously. But then aging evolved right after sexual reproduction evolved. Okay, before then there wasn't anything. But all of a sudden it turned out eliminating the longer lived actually increased diversity by allowing the offspring to interbreed, as opposed to the longer lived, or the parents, rebreeding. Okay, because the offspring can provide more diversity, because they have shuffled genes. They can shuffle their genes with each other and provide even more diversity that the parents could have ever provided. So it turned out any species that had evolved a way of eliminating the longer lived had a greater chance, as long as they were a sexually reproducing species, they had a greater chance of surviving a rapidly changing environment, because the members of the species had increased diversity. Okay, so the ones that didn't went extinct and the ones that did flourished. Okay, so it turned out, I always say there's no evolutionary advantage to living longer than it takes to raise your young. 300,000 years ago, when humans first evolved, when Homo sapiens first, women were having babies at about 13, and babies could fend for themselves by the time they were 7. So that meant there was no reason for a human to live longer than 20 years old. Okay, therefore, it was a benefit to the species to have some way to eliminate them. Now, it turns out there's a whole bunch of different ways that evolve for different species to eliminate the longer lived. Humans, and the other ones I mentioned before, just happen to pick shutting the telomerase gene off, okay, and allowing telomeres to shorten. That's the human, the dogs and cats and horses, their mechanism of eliminating the longer lived. That's why we don't have very many diseases before we've raised our young. Most of them happen after we've raised. That's why, like a lot of telomeres aren't just involved in aging. They're involved in heart disease, cancer. The shorter your telomeres get, the higher risk of cancer gets, the weaker your immune system gets. All this is timed to not happen until after you raised your young. I guess one of my best examples is drinking alcohol. You can drink all the alcohol you want when you're young. And yes, it's killing your liver cells, but so what? You have other cells that can divide to replace those damaged liver cells. When you get to about 40, because of this accelerated cell division, which is causing, therefore, accelerated telomere shortening, when you get to about 40 years old, your cells can no longer divide to replace those damaged liver cells because their telomeres got too short, too fast. Okay, so now all of a sudden, you've raised your young, now you can't replace your damaged liver cells, and now you develop liver cirrhosis, which is actually an accumulation of dead cells, and you die of liver cirrhosis. So, I don't drink, I don't promote drinking, but I do say that when we find a way to cure aging or lengthen telomeres, we're also going to be able to allow people to drink as much as they want forever and never have liver cirrhosis. And same way, I could say the same kind of argument for muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's. Amazing. So one of the things that Ron DePinto did, I'm going off subject again. One of the things that Ron DePinto did was he measured brain sizes of the engineered mice he had. He also measured their ability to remember things. Okay, and he found that when he lengthened the telomeres, the mouse brains returned to normal size. The ones that were suffering from dementia returned to normal size, and they could remember how to go through a maze again that they had forgotten how to go through. So, which was saying that Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia might not be the loss of memory, might be just loss of access to them. And lengthening telomeres will restore the access to the memory. And we even know the cell types, like oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells and astrocytes. Those things all experience telomere shortening, even though our neurons don't. Okay, but our neurons are like a copper wire. It has to be surrounded by insulation. These other cells that I just mentioned are involved in making that insulation, and astrocytes are involved in providing the neurons with immune protection. When those cells lose telomere shortening and can't divide anymore, they can't protect the neurons anymore. So you get these diseases. And the neurons might be just connecting our brains to the memory, the stored memory. I'm a wealth of information on all this.
I'm loving it. I'm geeking out on this because, my background's exercise physiology and anatomy, and I love this stuff. So hopefully the listeners and viewers are as well. I'm sure they are. And I want to really kind of dive in a little bit. So what do we do to preserve our telomeres, to regrow them, to extend them? Obviously, Telo-Vital is there to support telomere health. What was kind of the guiding philosophy behind the product? And I think this is kind of maybe a dumb question, but a good question to underscore to the viewers and the listeners. How do you ensure it's grounded in science rather than hype?
Well, you can't always trust marketers. That's for sure. And I never actually complain about products and stuff like that, but I do complain a lot about the fact that a lot of marketers often will make false claims to sell their products, and it's just terrible. But the thing is that I believe that if people want to really get away from the hype and hear about the science, then watch my YouTube videos. Okay, I've also written a few books. They're very short books because I don't do the fluff. You read a book on aging and you spend half the book listening to the author's biography and things like that. So I leave all that out. I just get right to the point. But it's like my obsession is, as I said, to cure my own aging. So I'm not going to hype myself. I believe that telomeres are a very critical thing that we have to all protect. And there's two levels. One is protecting your body from accelerated telomere shortening, and also lengthen each telomere. Okay, those are two separate subjects. Okay, so if we dive into the first one first, accelerated telomere shortening is going to happen every time you accelerate cell division. Okay, right now, normal operations of bodily functions require that cells that I call frontline cells have to do all the work, just like there's a front line and then there's reserves in the back. The frontline cells have a wear and tear to do their job that can't be decreased. Okay, so just like the cells lining your blood vessels, blood's flowing through, there's a wear and tear. Okay, so the average frontline cell in any of our organs and tissues, the average lifespan is about 1 year. So a cell loses its life after 1 year, a reserve cell divides to replace that cell. And so because that cell, the reserve cell can be a progenitor cell or a stem cell, because that cell had to divide to replace that frontline cell, experienced telomere shortening, loss of one ride ticket. So we're limited there. But so when we do the math on that, knowing that the normal lifespan from normal bodily functions is 1 year, we know that we can't. Our lifespan and health span is limited to 125 years as a theoretical maximum. Okay, and that's only if we lead the perfect lifestyle and have the perfect genetics. Okay, I mean, somebody who's got muscular dystrophy, that's a mutation in a dystrophin gene that's going to cause muscle turnover to be faster. Therefore, that person is not going to be able to overcome that mutation or that gene variation, because we don't know if it's they're not going to be overcome that variation by lifestyle. Okay, they can a little bit, but there's no way they're going to. If they had led the perfect lifestyle, they're not going to live to be 125 just because of the genetics of muscle turnover. But so you have that going, but lifestyle things. There's lifestyle things you can do, and one of the things is decrease oxidative stress. Okay, because oxidative stress, like free radicals, UV light, things like that, those all actually damage. Okay, and I've studied that a lot too, but I'm not going to go into how the damage occurs there. But it damage, and then that causes the telomeres to break essentially and become shorter. So people that are doing a lot of oxidative stress, they are accelerating their telomere shortening just by breaking them. So decrease oxidative stress. So antioxidants. Take antioxidants. But inflammation decreases telomere shortening by accelerating the rate of cell division, especially in your immune system. And so take anti-inflammatories. Okay. So there's a lot of different things, and this product Telo-Vital, that does contain antioxidants and anti-inflammatory. So it's not just focused on the second approach, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Let me just say, things that people can do to decrease accelerated telomere shortening are: don't smoke, don't be obese, meditate, do yoga. Okay, those are great for decreasing not just oxidative stress, but psychological stress, which causes oxidative stress. Let's see, what else? Exercise, keep it fun. Two of the best things people could be taking are vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids. I'm actually vegan, so I don't take omega-3 fatty acids, but I do take a synthetic form of it, and I'm going blank on the name of it right now. So I get my omega-3s another way. But and boy, you don't want to know why I'm a vegan. That's a long story too.
Well, actually, I do, and I'll probably ask that question here in a little bit since you brought it up.
Well, okay, let me just go on a chance. It's because I'm sensitive to arachidonic acid. Okay. And if you read Floyd Clifton's book, Inflammation Nation, he explains that arachidonic acid is only found in meats, fish, fowl, meats, and dairy. It's not found in plants. And so you can avoid arachidonic acid. I also get blood work from a test called ALCAT, ALCAT. Like once a year, it tells me what foods are inducing inflammation in me because I want to not eat those foods. And it changes every year. The foods that come out showing that I'm inducing inflammation are usually related to meats, fish, fowl. But I also like the side effect that I'm saving a few animals. But okay, so an inflammatory and non-inflammatory diet is extremely important. Let's see, what else? So pessimism. There's actually studies now showing that pessimism, 2 studies I know, pessimism shows that it accelerates telomere shortening somehow. I don't know how. If you don't believe you're going to live to be 100, you probably won't. If you do believe, you're optimistic, you have a better chance of living to be 100 than if you don't. And I have no explanation for that mechanism. But there's a few other things I've left off the list, but I'm sure I'll think of them eventually. But there's in a lot of my videos, I list all those things, all the things you can do to prevent accelerated telomere shortening. I would also recommend, I'm not marketing, but there's some books that I really, really recommend. And that's books written by Dr. Sandra Kaufman. They're called the Kaufman Protocol, which actually goes into really great detail about all the different supplements you can take to decrease oxidative stress and things like that, and a whole bunch of other benefits too. And those are the kind of things I follow. But I'm trying to think of if I've left anything out. I'm sure I have, but people can find them on my YouTube videos and stuff. And I don't go out of my way to make YouTube videos. What happens is I go speak at medical conferences, and they video me speaking, and then somebody circulates it on. But the other thing is, so besides protecting your body from accelerated telomere shortening, is to re-lengthen the telomeres. Okay, and here I'd like to introduce an analogy. Telomere shortening and lengthening is like a tug of war. Okay, so in all of our cells of our body, we only have shorteners pulling to shorten, and we can reduce the number of shorteners pulling to shorten by antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, and other things that prevent accelerated telomere shortening. But we can't get below what's called the basal level telomere shortening, which is from normal bodily functions. Okay, the wear and tear caused by normal body. That's what limits. So the basal level rate of telomere shortening is what limits our lifespan to 125 years. In our reproductive cells, we have people on the other side of the tug of war that's making this tug of war a tie. And it's important that it's not just constant. There's every time a cell divides, a telomere shorten, then afterwards telomerase comes in and re-lengthens it. So the telomeres are going back and forth, long, short, long, short, long. They're two separate processes. Okay, so what we have done in our research is we have developed a lot of different ways now to add people to the other side of a tug of war to lengthen. They still lose the tug of war. They just lose it at a shorter rate. Okay, because we haven't found a way to produce as much telomerase in our cells as reproductive cells have. Using supplements or diets or lifestyles or things like that. We can only get it a little bit. And at least it decreases the rate of telomere shortening, which is decreasing the rate of aging. And that's a good thing. Because I hear a lot of people saying, well, you mean it won't reverse my aging? No, it won't reverse your aging, but it'll slow it down. Be happy with that. But we will be able to reverse aging soon. Okay, I'm obsessed with that. I'm working on that, and it's going to get better. Things are going to get better and better and better. But yeah, so finding ways to induce expression of telomerase in all of your cells, not just your reproductive cells, is this next best thing to extending your lifespan and your health span. Okay, so there's decrease in accelerated telomere shortening and increasing telomere length. Those are the best things people could be doing, and those are going to have an indirect effect on everything else, including DNA methylation, IgG glycosylation, hand grip. There's some of my talks I will show 100 different things that you can do to measure aging. I always say that reversing that biomarker does not mean you reversed your aging. It only means you reversed the biomarker. I will often show that when you go into your doctor's office, I know I'm getting off subject. When you go into your doctor's office and you say, doctor, please give me something to reverse my aging. You're not asking your doctor to give you something that makes your telomeres long. You're not asking your doctor to change your DNA methylation paths. You're not asking them to change your IgG glycosylation. You're not asking them just to change your hand grip, things like that. You're asking, you want to look and feel and behave like you're 25 again. So I will often show two pictures of Betty White at 25 and 85. And I will say, does anybody here not know which photo of Betty White was taken first? Gets a big laugh, but I say, okay, now tell me, how do you know? I mean, there's so many different things. There's the wrinkles, their hair color, the fat production. There's so many things, the wrinkles in the neck. There's so many things that there isn't just one biomarker, but we all know. We can walk down the street and we can look at people and we can guess their age just by looking at them. How do we do that? I mean, we don't have any measurements. You can't measure aging. Okay, you can't even measure the slowing of aging. There's no way to measure the slowing of aging, but you can measure the reversal of aging qualitatively. Okay, I sometimes call it qualitatively quantitative. Okay, I give it a QQ score. So we do a lot of our work here with QQ scores. Okay, so we can't tell you how much change, but we can tell that this person looks younger than this person, or this person acts younger, or this mouse looks younger, or whatever. But we can't say how much by. Okay, so I say that if somebody tells you that they have reversed your aging and you did not pass the Betty White test, then you have not reversed your aging. Okay, and I forget even now what the question was. I got so far off subject. But
oh, not really. I don't think you got off subject, but yeah, you have me wanting to go down a whole Brian Johnson rabbit hole, but I won't do that.
Oh, why not? Brian.
Okay, that's good. That rabbit hole.
Of the whole field.
Yeah, because I was thinking about him when you first mentioned that you really can't reverse things beyond 25 because now you're getting into the developmental stage. But his whole point is he wants to be eternally 18 years old.
Yeah, well, 18, 25. It's the same thing as far as I'm concerned. I do believe in Brian Johnson and everything he's doing and stuff like that, but I do understand the biology a little more than he does, and so but that's so what? Okay, but he's definitely on the right tracks and stuff like that. He's doing everything, and we're going to learn a lot from him.
So, but he's not going to be the one that's going to solve the telomerase problem. It's going to be you.
He's going to be the one who's going to prove it. Okay, maybe he's going to be the one who's going to, when we do get it solved, he's going to be first in line to take it. And when we see him become 18 or 25 again, he'll be passing what I call the Betty White test.
I'm sure I'm not passing the Betty White test.
Well, we all are. We're going to, I guarantee it.
So for the average listener and viewer over 50 who just simply wants to age well, what are some more realistic science-based practices that they, and I should say we, meaning myself, can adopt today to support cellular health? And we've touched on a few of those. You mentioned kind of diet and exercise.
I would say there's so many different things. And I would read Dr. Sandra Kaufman's books. I would read Dr. Amy Doneen's books. I would read Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn's books. I would read Floyd Clifton's books. I mean, these are people that I think really have nailed a lot of things, but they talk about a lot of different things, especially Dr. Sandra Kaufman. And so I do believe, I don't have 100% proof, but I believe enough of it that I practice it. And that's keep your NAD levels up. And, nicotinamide riboside, I think, is something everybody should be taking to keep their, and there's also NMN too and stuff like that. But I take nicotinamide riboside every day. And, antioxidants, anti-inflammatories. I take several antioxidants, and because they actually do play different roles and stuff like that. I take alpha lipoic acid, I take ECGs. I can never remember the order of those letters from green tea. Trying to remember I have so many supplements I take, I can't remember them all. But I know I take 4 different antioxidants, and I studied them years and years ago. And once I knew which ones to take, I forgot why I take them. But I do take them. But yeah, it's like there's so many different things. But I think that people get a lot of value out of listening to people like the doctors that I just mentioned. And there's a lot more that could help too. But I think a lot of them follow the doctors that I just mentioned. I know, like, for instance, Dr. Amy Doneen, she does weekly online classes where she'll have like hundreds of doctors in the audience listening to what she has to say. And then they go out and say the same thing. Okay, and so that's what all these people that I just mentioned do as a regular thing. They become doctors that teach continuing medical education, because doctors don't get any training except from sales reps. After they've gotten their MD, they have to go and listen to some of the top doctors do continuing medical education. I teach continuing medical education too, but I don't rank as thorough as some of these other doctors. I tend to focus more on just aging. But but let's see. I do a lot of things, but I think I've mentioned most of them already. Ways of exercising, supplements, things like. I can't think of anything that I haven't already mentioned. So.
I think you've kind of hit I identify as 6 pillars, and it actually started with 4 when I started teaching pathophysiology and exercise many, many years ago. I recognized that exercise, maintaining healthy body composition, eating a healthy diet, and I think we could dive into a little bit deeper what that healthy diet is, and not smoking were my 4. And then we've since added sleep hygiene and purposeful social connections, which kind of goes back into the mindfulness, some of the meditation, but also just having those positive people. You mentioned pessimisticity Is that a word?
Yeah.
Pessimism, decreasing the length of your telomeres.
Yeah.
Well, if you're surrounding yourself with people who are optimistic, supportive, and encouraging, that seems like that would at least slow the process of shortening those telomeres.
I agree with everything you just said. I'm not in the business that you are, okay? Because you're educating people. I'm buried in the lab, at the lab bench, working with human cells and petri dishes and stuff like that, just trying to understand the mechanisms and things like that. Where it's like, I think the world's lucky to have people like you spreading all the right things, and I hope I've been help for you.
Well, you've been a tremendous help, and I really appreciate when I can bring the deeper science into the conversation so that it's not just fluff. Because people will hear, oh yeah, exercise, eat right, do all that stuff. Sure, my grandmother did that and she died young. It's like, well, there's more to it than that, and it's that interaction between all of that. And the mechanisms are getting us close, but we really have to better understand why these things are working to our benefit. And that's where, for me, diet in particular has, really taken a big shift lately. My cholesterol is high. My doctor's trying to put me on statins, and I'm like, no way in hell am I doing statins. There's lifestyle things that I can do. And, I've been leaning much more into, I don't see myself going vegan, but I might want to look a little bit deeper into that because I had not thought about some of the arachidonic acid sensitivities and things like that. And it makes sense now as I've been reading that, poultry is actually worse than red meat for longevity. And it probably comes down then to the arachidonic acid. But I'm trying to eat much less meat and eating far more legumes, eating a much more, I don't like probably plant-based diet because I think that turns a lot of people off. Vegan does kind of the same thing. You're not an obnoxious vegan, but you get a lot of people that really are, and that turns people off. But I'm thinking more plant-centric is more terminology I would use, where I want to focus more on eating about 90% of my diet from plant-based foods and getting away from meat and then making the better choices if I am eating meat products. What am I eating? How am I cooking them? And doing all that.
I didn't choose a particular diet. I just found myself being vegan, okay? But everybody's different. That's the key thing. And so you're saying poultry can accelerate aging better more than red meats, but that might not be true for everybody. But that's what I like about the ALCAT test, ALCAT. And I don't know who sells it, but there's different companies that provide it. I think that's the most useful thing that anybody could be doing. And so at least, and don't just, pick from 10 different diets that you can choose from.
You're right.
Find out what works for you from doing this test. And that's what I did. And then one day somebody said, oh, that makes you a vegan. And I thought, okay, so I'm a vegan. But it's the key is that everybody's different. There's no way to just say that everybody should be on the same diet because everybody's sensitivities. I was head of the molecular biology division of the inflammation immunology group at a company called Burlex Biosciences for many years, 12 years. And one thing I did learn a lot at that point was our immune responses are based, our abilities to develop certain types of immune responses based on certain regions in our chromosomes called the V, D, and J that make up the variable region of our antibody. So when you make a new antibody, it's got this part on the antibody called the variable region, which then recognizes an invader, okay, and attacks it. Well, that is made up of shuffling of the V, D, and J regions. And everybody's V, D, and J regions are different, okay? And so just because one person has a reaction to some drug or food or something like that doesn't mean everybody's got it or even has the ability to have it. So yeah, so I don't put everything in boxes. I just study myself when it comes to me and just learn what I can and correct as I can.
Well, I teach my students that one of the most overlooked principles of exercise adaptation is the principle of individuality. And it goes the same for diet and everything else. We're on this continuum, and you're right. I'm not going to say that vegan approach is the best for everybody. It's going to be best for some. Just like, I don't know that I'd go as far as say carnivore is best for anybody in particular, but we do know that for people with certain brain conditions, whether it's epilepsy, schizophrenia, even Alzheimer's and some of those dementias, a ketogenic diet can be of benefit there. Now, would I recommend a ketogenic diet to someone like yourself that's going out and running, hundreds of miles in a race? I don't think I would necessarily do that, but there are people that are out there who say they're ultra marathoners and they're on a ketogenic diet. So it works, it works.
I'm not hooked on one thing or another, but I am one of the people responsible for a conference called the Rad Fest. There was a speaker at the Rad Fest just a few weeks ago that spoke on the ketogenic diet. And it was the best presentation I'd ever heard of somebody explaining the benefits of a ketogenic diet and why some people should be on it and some people should. And that was Dr. Amy Gutman, Gutman. I don't know if I
know that name
right, but I was blown away. I went backstage and I was almost bowing to her saying, wow, that was great, because I've never really been sold on the ketogenic diet until then. Now I think people that could benefit from it should be on it.
Yeah, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, there's many more different diets on that spectrum that you can pick from.
I want to say it's not the goal of you or me, I think, to make everybody understand the mechanisms of actions and why they should do it. So, but I think you and I should understand that and then be able to tell everybody else, because they have to have faith in somebody, okay? Because nobody's going to be as obsessed as you and I are and trying to learn everything like that. But it's good that maybe I should do more like you, but at least you're out there telling everybody the right things to do. And I think that's a really good thing, because there's no way we're ever going to get everybody to learn it themselves.
Yeah, well, I don't want you to take the pathway I'm taking, because that's going to take you away from solving the problem. We need people like yourself that are down there in the trenches, getting at the molecular level, looking at the very specifics and trying to solve the problems. I know for myself, I tend to be much more the educator piece. That's taken me away from doing a more purer science. I have to interpret and understand the science, but without people like yourself, there's nothing to interpret and try and educate people based on. So keep doing what you're doing. I'll keep kind of doing what I'm doing, and we'll keep hopefully progressing people.
When people stop dying, I will retire. Do something else.
That sounds good. Well, I'm going to keep working then until you solve the problem, so I don't have to retire. I can just keep making money. What are you doing personally to age well? This is a question we ask of all our guests. I know we're getting to kind of a long point here, but I want to ask you because, you're all about aging well and aging longer. So what are you doing personally other than running a couple miles at least a day?
Well, oftentimes I'm embarrassed to say so because I do so much, but I literally take 80 supplements a day.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And I know some other people do the same thing, like Ray Kurzweil and others, but I have them, every one of them. I understand exactly the mechanism of why I'm taking it, stuff like that. And I thank Dr. Sandra Kaufman a lot for that, because her books are just so informative on the action. I can't learn everything, okay? Because I'm focused on telomere biology, but she provides me with information that by reading her books that I can't get to. I do yoga and meditation. I have my own yoga studio. I'm at work right now, and I have a yoga studio here at work that I use. What else do I do? I keep my sugar levels low. Getting to know Touchstone Essentials has changed my life too, because one of the first things I did was due diligence on all their products. Okay, what I'm really skilled at is something that I call critical meta-analysis of peer-reviewed studies, which means I can say you can find anything to support what you wish to be true in the peer-reviewed studies. So you can't necessarily believe something just because it's peer-reviewed. What I do, and you can do a meta-analysis, which means just look at all the papers that study the same thing and see what the consensus is. But then a lot of times marketers and stuff like that will find ways of getting things into the literature which will make the wrong things have more consensus, more papers saying the wrong thing than the right thing. So I do what's called critical meta-analysis. I have the ability to be able to look at a study, good at statistical theory. I minored in that in college. So I do the critical meta-analysis of peer-reviewed studies. And I even have started a podcast. It's called Up One, because I take it up a notch in terms of analyzing what's good and what's not. But I did the due diligence on Touchstone products, and they have a lot of products that I think are really good that I've gotten really religious with. They have this glucose control that converts sugar into fiber, and the fiber is good for you, sugar is bad for you, and so it works. I've done mechanism of action studies on the mechanism of actions. It really does work. Then there's zeolites, which will bind to heavy metals and other type of toxins and remove those. I'm a big believer in that. Fulvic acid, which is the active ingredient in shilajit. I've always been a fan of shilajit, but I've also been aware of the fact that shilajit has a lot of side effects, things that cause side effects. So fulvic acid is really good. Nattokinase, heart health, things like that. So I've those are other things that I've started doing religiously. And believe me, I've worked with other companies like TouchTone and wouldn't touch any of their products just because I just never found anything really great about them. It's like that made me feel like they were TouchTone products. I'm a big fan of. Now I sound like a marketer. I know.
It's okay. They're probably appreciating that.
But you asked me the questions like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to think of the more recent changes come first to mind. But think positively. I do have a degree in psychology, experimental psychology, when I was an undergrad, so I'm a big believer in psychology plays a big role. And I've developed a lot of cancer drugs in my past. In fact, I was National Inventor of the Year in 1998 for my cancer, and which is surprising to most because I'm so focused on aging. But I do consider it cancer and aging. But I was surprised in the clinical studies of some of these drugs how many people in the placebo group got cured of their cancer. It can only be that they believed they were taking the real drug and not the placebo, and that made them cure their own cancer. So I think having a very positive aspect on things and just leading a healthy lifestyle, pretty much everything your mother told you when you were is true.
Yeah.
And stay away from saturated fats and trans fats. Boy, those are terrible for you. High sugar. I tend to do that. I do have a fortunate benefit. I do have an identical twin brother. Okay, we have the exact same genetics. I don't know if he's done it intentionally or unintentionally, but he has not followed the same type of lifestyle that I have. So he and I are always comparing ourselves and stuff like that. I feel like I look 10 years younger than him. I hope he doesn't listen to this. But I do feel like I'm doing something right that he's not doing, and he is starting to do some of these things because his wife is getting upset with him for not looking as young as I do.
I'm taking he doesn't run ultra marathons. No. He's not a vegan.
No. Well, he's now a vegan. He has become a vegan, and he's actually started a group on Facebook called the Squeaky Vegans, and that's because he's a big follower of Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who actually promotes plant-based diet and also no oils. Okay, but that's mostly because oils cause, and I think the data is pretty good on this too. Oils, though they have health benefits, they also cause collateral arteries in your microvascular to collapse. Okay, so if you are somebody that has like a plaque buildup in your coronary arteries and suddenly it's clogged, you could actually not even know it if your collateral arteries and your microvascular are all open. Okay, because I've seen pictures where they've digested everything away, taken a heart and digested everything away except for the blood vessels, and the heart still looks like the original heart because there's so many blood vessels going through our heart. It's not just the 3 or 4 coronary arteries that we have. Yeah. And so by keeping all those open helps your heart, and that's the reason for staying away from oil, even olive oil.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I've been hearing a lot more lately about the effect that olive oil can have on collapsing those collateral arteries.
Yeah, but there's a lot of advantages to oils too. So it's hard to choose. But I can't think of anything else that I do. But if you gave me a multiple choice, I could tell you yes, on all of them.
There's just too many choices, though. We could spend a whole podcast just walk through every multiple choice item, and have to go through the alphabet probably 5 or 6 times.
And once you know, you don't have to remember. You just stick with it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you just build those habits, and you do what works for you, and you just keep doing it consistently.
Like sleep.
So is there anything we missed talking about today?
Well, we didn't talk about sleep. You mentioned sleep, but I do make a very big point. I sleep with 2 sleep watches, and I make certain that I record every time when I go to bed. Don't get up until 7 to 8 hours later, just because I know the benefits. And oftentimes we'll record my sleep. This is where I get embarrassed because of the crazy stuff I do. I record my sleep because if I have sleep apnea or something like that, you can hear it. You don't need to go to a sleep study. You can actually hear yourself gasping for air and stuff like that. So I make certain that I don't have any of those kind of problems, etc.
I've been on a CPAP for about 3 months, and I feel like it's worse for me. And I monitor my sleep. I I started with a Garmin watch, but the battery life was horrible on that thing. And so I'm actually trying out a Helio strap that it's cheaper. It's kind of like Whoop, but it does very similar, and you don't have to have the subscription. And, it's basically telling me that my events are higher than what my sleep apnea machine tells me my events are. My recovery scores just aren't where they should be, even, with all the other things that I do in sleep hygiene. And so I'm feeling like maybe this, sleep apnea thing isn't the problem, and maybe it's not being helped. Maybe it's being harmed by using the CPAP. So I'm got to push myself to just, okay, I'm going to pull the plug. I'm going to go off it for a week and see what happens. Again, sleep is critical to me.
Everybody's different. CPAP's going to work for some people, but not for everybody.
Yeah.
And there are these other mouth guards and stuff like that. They work for some people, but not everybody.
Yeah.
So who knows?
So, well, I'm sure you said your lab buzzer went off, so you might have some things to do.
Yeah, well, I do have some things to do, but that buzzer, that alarm, I think was maybe signaling the battery was low or something like that, because it kept beeping, and it wasn't even on. But I really enjoyed this.
I enjoyed it too. Fun. This is great.
So good luck, and keep helping everybody. I guess
you too. Just keep doing what you're doing, and help us all age well. And we'll have to have you back on some point in the future as the research progresses, and maybe we can make the announcement on here that aging has been cured.
Okay, I will make a point of letting you know the instant that happens. All right,
that sounds great.
Thank you.
Dr. Andrews, thank you. I just appreciate it. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep aging well.
All right.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.